моих братьев благослови наши руки. Мы в поисках больших денег, мы в деле круглые сутки. Благослови
Without radio show, man, they everywhere.
Благослови моих братьев.
We're tuning in for another episode of Make That Radio Show. I'm your host, Andres, and we have another interview for y'all being brought via Zoom. We have Colin Sanburg, who's a multi-business owner and founder of FinElevate. Met him through the pod match services that I've been doing. So anybody out there, if y'all want to, just hit me up and I'll send a link over that. But Colin, I thought your story is fascinating. One, business-minded as well. And the fact that, you lead your business with MBAs instead of the traditional CPAs. And there was something that you had, that you had put down I saw that I thought was important as well. Oh, you're talking about you struggle to add value through the accounting function of your own business, and you tried every way to complete the work, doing the 1099s, the employees, small firms and big firms. You kept coming back to the realization that typical accounting is a necessity, but adds no value to the business. That's a bold statement right there. I love it. So, Colin, go ahead and, give us some more background for the audience and stuff, and then let us know, at what point, did you arrive to where, realization I want to open my own business and do it in the manner that you did?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. My story is basically that when I was in my early 20s, I went to work for a small business. I had set the goal at that point that I wanted to own my own company. And so I just went to work for the person nearest me who already had a business. And, I got in and like happens in a lot of businesses, pretty soon you're pretty consumed. You're wearing a lot of different hats.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized was the financial part of that business was not working. And, I was a kid, I didn't know anything, but, it doesn't take a genius to know that something's not working when it comes to money.
Yeah.
And so as I started to, become more valuable within the company, I was asked to jump in and take over the financial side of the business, even though I didn't have an MBA at that time. I didn't have a lot of experience, kind of figuring out as I go. And so that was, where I developed my passion for solving these kind of problems was really just, I had to solve one problem at a time that we were facing, and we were facing all the problems. So, it took a lot of effort to work through that and a lot of time. But as I came out the other side, I really, have that deep appreciation for, getting the money side of your business right so that you can take care of your customers, so you can sell the product that you're passionate about. That to me is what it's all about. And unfortunately, the way most people go about accounting, whether you're a CPA, bookkeeper, or somebody's doing it in-house, the reality is they're just recording the transactions. They're just getting the bank statement organized, doing the credit cards. That's not going to ever tell you what to do, and that's not going to ever help improve your business. And so I think that's where everybody typically gets it wrong.
So I imagine your process is more of like looking at that information and understanding what that data really means to the business.
Correct.
Knowing that you're so I've done situations where I've helped like small business owners. I could say in particular, I remember a guy, he had a t-shirt business, and I went through and we went all the way down to the square inch of the vinyl. So it was very detailed, glitter as well, all that stuff, how many he can get out of using that particular product to, resell for the designs and all that stuff. Within 2 months, he was able to go from his house to an actual physical location. And he was profitable because one, his numbers were just low. I'm like, dude, I'm telling him, you're not making any money doing this whatsoever. So I imagine yours is, your process is similar to that. So with doing it, what made you want to really do it yourself? Because you saw a need for it. But then, working for, the family business and then, doing your own is a little different because, once you do your own, you set yourself on this path where, you have to build the infrastructure, you have to build their awareness, you have to do all these other hats that you normally didn't typically do.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So yeah, my first business was originally a family business. I ended up taking it over Ran that for 13 years as CEO. I bought it over 3 different transactions to ultimately own it. Still own it to this day, 22 years later. And it's a manufacturing company. It's a project-based business, which is a really hard business model to do. And so, yeah, as I made other investments, in a cabinet business, in an industrial door business, I got a little more kind of chops for what you're looking for and what it really takes. And then to your point, I've always loved working with other entrepreneurs, mastermind groups, group coaching type sessions. Those are places where I've met a lot of peers and friends, and I always just was kind of that financial guy in that world. Just kind of how my mind saw business. And so what really changed for me was during COVID, the PPP was coming out, and that was a big pipeline for businesses, and that really sustained businesses for a year or two. Well, it was coming out, if you recall those times, it was like not a lot of information, got to go through a bank. We're hearing conflicting stuff every time you look on the news or something different about how it's going to work. And so I just remember a lot of entrepreneurs coming to me and asking my advice and opinion on what it was going to look like and what I was doing. And it kind of planted this seed for me that hey, I could do this. I could build a company that actually specialized in helping with things like this. And so that was kind of the beginning of what ultimately became FinElevate. My firm was exactly like you said, I've got to get in the weeds to help people. You can't just throw a couple ideas at somebody or say, hey, go read a book to a non-financial person and expect that they're going to suddenly have this epiphany and be a financial person. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, definitely understand that. So in doing that, I'm sure you put your potential clients through a process. How open are they to that process, and do you get a lot of resentment, or not resentment, but a lot of pushback? Because sometimes depending on how long the person has been running the business or they've been involved with it, even though they know they're experiencing hard times, sometimes it's hard for them to turn that off, or that ego off, and to actually listen.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm a big believer in EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System. I'm in things like strategic coach. So usually, from my experience, that's the first kind of place that feeling that entrepreneurs bump up against, is this belief that I have to be everything. I have to be the expert. I only hire people who don't know as much as me in some area of the business. And once you break through that, I think, business owners start to realize hey, I've got to get the right help to go where I'm going to go, right? No one's success story. I don't care if you're talking about a famous person or just a person off the street. No one's success story said, I kept doing it the same way over and over again, working on it by myself, and eventually broke through. It's well, I met this person, or I read this book, or there's always those breakthroughs come from outside influence. And so, yeah, I just encourage, business owners to be real about that. It's okay. You're not going to be an expert at ops and sales and finance, and light the world on fire with your management. It's just not going to happen. You need people who are willing to admit what their limitations are and say hey, it's not just that I'm not great at it. I don't even like it. We can work with that. But, to your point, what we can't do, and this from helping people, you cannot help someone who won't admit that they've got problems.
Yeah.
So, that's really the first step, is just saying, hey, I don't like this stuff, or I'm not good at this stuff. And a lot of people I see, they're successful, maybe they're growing, they're starting to hit, upper six, they're in the 7 figures. All of a sudden they're like, man, I never did learn about this stuff. And now they start having a little bit of insecurity around well, I don't want my team to know that I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't want, so you just got to get past that ego and just, rip off that Band-Aid, man, and own it. Who cares? We can always learn and get better.
I see you have a lot of books behind you, and I love that. How often do you get to read?
Man, I'm a big audio guy as well. So if you can see, my audio library is probably bigger than this one. I'm a big, because I love, what I love about audio is the efficiency of being able to listen to it, 1.5 times, 2 times. You go 2 and above, it starts to sound like chipmunks. But, for me, I'm looking for the really good nuggets of information. And so to me, that's my number one passion, believe it or not, is like I'm obsessed with the idea of I've got to go to bed smarter than I woke up. If I
Okay.
do that every day, it doesn't matter how many other losses I take in other areas, I'm
Mm.
gonna win in the end, is kind of my mantra.
So how do you like being looked upon as like the visionary then for, the firm and stuff like that, and knowing that, you have your strong suits, but then, you also have things that you're probably not as good as well. Have you gotten in your way a little bit, or have you been able to take your own advice?
Hey, always. I mean, I'm a big believer. Like, I got to screw it up the first time to be able to figure out how to get it right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of a little bit of an oddball in that, in my early businesses, I was more of the integrator style
Hmm.
because the businesses didn't need a lot of vision; they needed execution, right? And I
Hmm.
still am a believer execution wins in the end, right?
Hmm.
But I think that as we get into more creative pursuits, or we're trying to do a startup, or we're trying to change an industry a little bit, like that requires you to be a little more visionary. And so as I've learned more in my career, I get more and more visionary the more I learn.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I definitely have to listen to my own advice. When I started FinElevate, the very first thing I did, I mean, I literally wrote what's called a vivid vision. So it's
Hmm.
a 3 to 5 page document. If you maybe heard of that, just basically paint the picture. Like, what does this future version look like in 3 to 5 years? And
Hmm.
then the second thing I did was go hire a director of operations
Hmm.
and Rachel. And the minute I found Rachel, I was like, all right, here's the deal. I'm a little crazy.
Hmm.
I'm gonna be all over, I'm gonna be all over the place. I'm gonna hit you, I'm gonna call you up out of nowhere, and I'm gonna be talking about something that, is just when it hits, right? You got to kind
Hmm.
of ride that wave as a visionary,
Hmm.
but you need someone on the team. You need that stability of people being able to say, like, hey, that's great, but it's still Tuesday. We're still gonna make sure the trains run on time. We're still gonna get you the
I
list.
love it.
You gotta have both, man. You gotta have both.
So what's the biggest lesson you've learned thus far then in, working a startup versus already going into a situation where it's already established?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. So I've done established businesses. I've done a couple turnarounds, and I would say with a startup, it's really about not you're not locked into any of that old thinking.
Hmm.
The flip side, and so I'm a big believer of, like, the flip side. So your greatest strength also your greatest weakness, right? It's like
Hmm.
there's always two sides of the coin. So on the one hand, it's amazing. It's so freeing to not be locked into, like, well, here's how we've always done it and all that kind of thing. The problem is the world is full of opportunities. There's a
Hmm.
million different little squirrels you could chase,
Hmm.
And so it's really about, like, there's a time for vision and a time for thinking big, and there's a time to get locked in and go get it done. And
Hmm.
so that's been the biggest, I feel like so much of the locked in is already in place in most companies
Hmm.
once they've been running for a while. So that takes a little effort to kind of, be it's because obviously the dreaming, the strategy, all that's the fun part. Like,
Hmm.
most of us who love business, like that's man, that's the playground. But I got to
Hmm.
get over here and get to work. I got to put the hard hat on and go over here and get some work done. It's
Hmm.
learning how to balance that in a new environment is a little tough.
Yeah. So what's your approach to balancing then? Because I imagine, with that, because business, I tell people who are going to start a business or have ambitions of starting a business, that's like, raising a child. What you put into it, what you're gonna get out of it, but it's gonna take a lot of energy and effort and stuff. So with where you are in your life right now, how do you balance all that? Because you got the wife, you got the kids, you want to make sure that everything is getting its proper attention, but also that the business needs its proper attention as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know that any of us ever, quote, figured that out.
Hmm.
It's like, man, every day, every week, I'm sitting here right now, we're having this conversation late 2023. I'm
Hmm.
thinking about 2024. Like, how do I
Hmm.
upgrade? How do I reshuffle the deck? For me, I'm a huge believer in the family component. Like, I think you have to be a good, well-rounded human to be
Hmm.
able to run a good, well-rounded business. And so for me, I'm always going to prioritize, like, all right, what are the little upgrades? So like now I take my kids to school every day
Hmm.
with my wife. We do that as a family. And, it definitely costs me a little time. Sometimes I get up, get to work on the laptop in the morning before we take the kids to school
Hmm.
because, the demands are high, right?
Hmm.
Especially I still own multiple businesses and I'm doing this startup. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But, to me, they're like my kids, that'll change their perception of their whole childhood. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's something my parents never had the luxury of doing with me. And so like I want to show them like that's the example I want to be for them.
Mm-hmm.
And and what I've learned is it ends up being, there is never, it's kind of like we say with time, right? You don't find time, you make time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really about understanding what are those priorities, what am I going to focus on, and always looking like, hey, there's always a little bit better way. And
Mm-hmm.
I may lose today, I may screw up today, I might struggle. I'm gonna be better tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Keep rolling like that.
Yeah. So, with your experience in everything you've done so far, have you had the opportunity to where it came back full circle, where you inspired someone and they went out there and they chased their dreams?
I have, man. In fact, I worked a lot with my former executive assistant, and
Mm-hmm.
she came in. I always joke with her. She was a kid. I was like another, like her dad here in Texas. She's from
Mm-hmm.
California. So,
Mm-hmm.
but she grew up. She came and sat down one day, and we had a hard conversation. She was leaving. She was going to go, chase this other dream, work in a family business for her husband's family. She felt like it was the right thing to do for them and take care of
Mm-hmm.
her family and her future. I was bummed, I didn't want to see her
Mm-hmm.
go, but at the same
Yeah.
time, you have that proud feeling, right? It's just like I
Yeah.
hope I have that with my kids one day. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, I don't want them to leave,
Yeah.
but that day is gonna come where I'm gonna be like, all right, I'm gonna stay strong and get them out the door, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'll come cry in the pillow later if I need to.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the best feeling, man. There's nothing like, being involved with somebody like that, knowing that you had a little bit of influence on their life, and then
Mm-hmm.
checking back in with them, staying in touch with them and hearing, because now she's got to go through her whole own set of struggles. Like she
Mm-hmm.
always heard about mine. Now
Mm-hmm.
she's out doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
she calls me like, what is this? You didn't tell me about this part. So
But
that's
as we
right.
going through it and we establish stuff, I'm like we forget about some of the things, but then also it's hard for us to like just bring them up all the time. We just
Yep.
know that we went through it, we persevered, we was able to come out on the other end. We don't think about that until something similar pops up. So if nothing similar popped up, then, you wouldn't be thinking about
That's right.
it.
Yep.
I love it. So what do since you get to play the head role and everything, what do you love about that role? And then what would you change about that role?
Just about being a CEO or
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, about being the CEO.
So I would say that what I love about it is that I get to paint the picture.
Hmm.
Man, that's my passion. Like I love it. It's what I do. It's what I think about. To me, that's a 365-day a year thing.
Hmm.
I'll be sitting there on Christmas Day after I drink my coffee and the kids open all their
Hmm.
presents and they're off entertaining themselves. My mind's still in business. It's just how my mind
Hmm.
works. I love that part. The part that's not my favorite is it's a little tough to feel like you can't be in every place at once, right?
Hmm.
And feeling like, especially if I'm prioritizing things. So I hired my director of ops because I wanted somebody dedicated to the team. She loves that. That's her passion. It's not really my expertise.
Hmm.
I love the team, but it's not like being in the weeds of helping them. But then you
Hmm.
feel like, sometimes it can hurt that you're like, it could feel like you're prioritizing something above the people on your team. But the reality is somebody's got to be out there trying to push. Somebody's got to be out there, trying to sell, trying to come up with a big vision. So,
Hmm.
it's just the inability to be in more than one place at a time is sometimes tough.
Yeah, I definitely get that feeling because, like yourself, I have multiple things going on, multiple entities, and it's just hard splitting your time and knowing that you can do this, you can do that, or whatever. And, like you said, a balanced approach, and then especially having kids and stuff like that. So I definitely understand that. Um, what are some? Because I'm sure you run into a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs. You
Mm.
know, given the fact that you're on this path. What are some of the myths or the things that they are not gravitating towards, or something that they think because we have the shows like Shark Tank and
Yep.
And they like to like glorify, to me, they like to glorify that stuff. But like I did a series because I produce content as well. So I have this show that I shot called The Ugly Side of Entrepreneurship. And
Love it.
that's why I came up with it, because I want to get into the actual ugly side of entrepreneurship, things that people don't talk about. So with the people that you run into, what are some of the things that they're mentioning or that you know what I'm saying, needs to be fixed, their misconceptions.
No, I think what you just said, Andres, is powerful. Like
Mm-hmm.
the idea, and I think I saw this probably 10 or 15 years ago. I used to love like Inc. magazine. It was like a little
Mm-hmm.
more gritty. It was more about like what it really takes to run a company. And at some point along the way, I have a love-hate relationship with Shark Tank.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere along the way, this kind of mythical version of like number one, that selling part of your company solves all your problems. Like,
Mm-hmm.
man, no,
They
you
actually
get the
invited a
shark.
bigger problem.
Yeah, you don't think that shark's leaving the tank just because you walked out of there with a deal. Now the shark's living in your business, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
demands on you, the expectations are going to change dramatically. And just because you got a deal doesn't mean you leveled up. And
Mm-hmm.
it takes time. It takes time to develop. So I kind of have a love hate with that because, like you said, I think it's kind of created this idyllic version of running a company. And then, of course, the social media impact on everything in this world is,
Mm-hmm.
the flashiness, it's like the yacht and the car and it's like, man, that's not what running a business, like you said, it's the ugly side. And
Mm-hmm.
the biggest winners are the people who don't shy away from the ugly side. They dive in.
Mm-hmm.
They go all in on the ugly side, and they don't care about credit. They don't care about, looking good in the short term. They know, like, hey, I'm investing in myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. And then, if we're just talking about like a tip that I tell people, it's, I think it's true once you own a business, but it's certainly true if you're still looking at business. The reality is, if your goal is wealth in this life, and wealth is not, as we've heard, wealth's not measured in terms of money, it's
Mm-hmm.
measured in time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if
Mm-hmm.
you want wealth in your time, which mostly comes from having some amount of means outside, in terms of money,
Mm-hmm.
you have to get out of the rat race of selling your time for money.
Mm-hmm.
Period. So what do I mean by that? I mean, if you're in an hourly job, you got to figure out how to pivot to a salary job, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you're now being paid. If you're in a salary job, can you get on a commission job? Can you be doing something which you're paid for results? Because
Mm-hmm.
the most well compensated people in the world are paid by results, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately, even in a business, like looking at your business model, I don't want to see a business model where you're selling, hey, if I do this for you for an hour, you're going to give me X dollars. Like even lawyers can get paid a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a job. They can't sell that because you can't sell your own time more than once.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that idea. We're starting to see that a lot with kind of modern business models and people looking at content and things like that. But don't take the easy route. Go get in the weeds, figure out, go grind it, and figure out what it's really going to take. But kind
Mm-hmm.
of work your way up that chain of what you're really selling.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, you want to own intellectual property,
Mm-hmm.
ideas, assets that you
Mm-hmm.
can then make money for,
Mm-hmm.
not like I work an hour, I get paid an hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did. I'm right there with you with that. So then this your philosophy in business. Then I like to tell people I have a high business ethics, high business morals. Just because something is legal doesn't mean I necessarily
Mm.
do it. Right?
Yep.
How do you fall within that spectrum?
Oh, I agree. I agree. So my wife is a social worker. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of the world I married into is,
Mm-hmm.
and we always kind of joke, she's a social worker. I'm just like this business guy.
Mm-hmm.
But she's really helped mold me and change me and get me to see life. And I tried to be an empathetic person.
Mm-hmm.
And so to your point, like they're a business model. There's a lot of ways in this world to make a buck. But I got to be able to sleep at night. I got to be able to be proud. I got to be able to have my kids. They're not going to love, giving people financial help in a business. That may not be a passion of theirs. They might not think that's cool per se, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to be ashamed of it. They're not going to
Mm-hmm.
look at me and just think, like, oh man, dad would do anything to
Yeah.
make a buck.
Yeah, like he's Scrooge McDuck or something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
He's swimming in the money, but you ain't got nobody,
Yeah,
around you to
but
enjoy it. So
yeah.
I
Yep.
definitely get that. Um, if you could change one thing about just business overall, industry of business, whether it be like entry points, people being able to have access, anybody being able to have access to capital, things of that nature, what would you change?
Man, that's a great question. I think I would change people's access to education around,
Okay.
and I think the hard part, you can see like you were talking, I got a lot of books behind me. The more you get into the game of education, the easier it is to kind of figure out what lane things belong in. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're getting started, it could be really overwhelming to just and you hop on YouTube, everything's flashy in your face, and just a
Mm-hmm.
lot of overproduced, overhyped commercials, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so for somebody who doesn't have that basis of knowledge yet, that's really overwhelming. And so I just honestly, as a country, it's something I wish we do, not just for entrepreneurship, but across all trades. It's
Mm-hmm.
like we've never had a more accessible way to provide people with information and education. And so it's a
Mm-hmm.
shame that it's getting kind of used to make money instead of build people up.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely get that. Well, Colin, this has been a fantastic conversation. So I love having conversations like these, but for everybody out there, if anybody's looking to, consult and get more information, things of that nature, all the different services y'all can provide them, where would they need to go?
Yeah, so the easiest thing is either look me up on LinkedIn. I'm assuming you'll put that in show
Mm-hmm.
notes and that sort of thing. Look me up on LinkedIn, man. Look, I'm here to help. I love other entrepreneurs. This is definitely a new business that I've launched and that we're rolling with. But if somebody wants advice, like I'm kind of putting this out there. We call it the deep dive 45. Like I'll spend 45 minutes with you. I promise you no pitch. I'm not trying to sell you anything on that call. It is not about trying to get you on that call so I can start,
Mm-hmm.
asking you all these, buying signal questions.
Mm-hmm.
None of that nonsense. It's 45 minutes. The best thing I can throw you in terms of advice, in terms of help for your business. And whether you think you want to work with me or not, if that's valuable, take me up on it. Because as I'm doing that, I'm just trying to put good karma out in the world. I know enough
Mm-hmm.
opportunities and deals to come back. It doesn't have to be from every person I talk to. And I love young entrepreneurs who are hungry,
Mm-hmm.
ambitious. They
Mm-hmm.
know what they want. They just don't know how to get it yet. Like, man, that's
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's prime. That's beautiful. So I'm all
Yeah,
about helping people in any way I can.
that's what's up. I love it. Have you been able to like mentor yet and really have that mentor-mentee relationship?
Oh, I have, man, and I love it. There's nothing better. That was so I mentioned masterminds. Like that was a big part of how I got where I am in my career was when I was in my early to mid 20s. Masterminds
Mm-hmm.
weren't as well known as they are now. This is good, nearly 20 years ago. And I started down this path, got into a mastermind group, and I walk in and like, man, I'm in my early 20s. Everybody's twice my age, if not older.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started going up to them. And the minute they saw that I was ambitious, that I was hungry, but
Mm-hmm.
I was willing to work hard and do it the right way, and I was just a sponge, man, they couldn't
Mm-hmm.
get enough of trying to
Yeah.
help.
Oh yeah.
And that I love that. I feel the same way. The minute you meet somebody who's got it, doing it for the right reasons, they're not caught up on all the nonsense, and they're
Mm-hmm.
young, and they just like, hey, I don't know anything, but what can you help me with? Man, what could be more fulfilling than being part of
Mm-hmm.
that relationship? So yeah, I've sought that out a lot, and given that taking that time to give that word to the future, right?
Yeah, I love it because I do the same thing. I have a mentee that I've had since February, and she has come a long way. She's in her early 20s, and she's even today. She left today, and we have like a lot of sessions in between her doing stuff. 'Cause she does a lot of video production stuff now, and I love it. She's seen the growth. I'm excited for her. I love this, like, I'm just pouring into her, pouring into her, pouring into her, and it's just so fulfilling
Yeah.
that it's like indescribable. But Kyle, thank you for your time. Definitely would love to have you back on in the future to see where you're at and how many more people's lives that you have changed through business and everything else. Everybody out there, y'all make sure y'all go and look up the information. I'll have it on the screen displayed for y'all. But I really do appreciate it. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks, Andres, man. I had a blast. That was great.